They thought I was the boring daughter, the practical one, the emotionless ATM in a navy dress who showed up, wrote checks, fixed problems, and disappeared back into spreadsheets without needing applause. They forgot what I do for a living. My name is Maya Whitfield. I am 33 years old, African American, and I am a forensic accountant, not a bookkeeper, not someone who files receipts in color-coded folders because she likes office supplies, although I do. I investigate financial lies for a living. I trace money through shell companies, false invoices, hidden accounts, municipal filings, tax records, and corporate fraud schemes designed by people who are usually much smarter than my family. I have dismantled Ponzi operations that fooled regulators. I have found embezzled funds buried under 17 layers of offshore paperwork. I have sat across from executives worth hundreds of millions and watched their hands tremble when I explained exactly which number gave them away. And at that moment, in the middle of my parents' 35th anniversary party, I was holding a cardboard box with a dirty blender inside, not just any blender. The same blender I gave my mother 4 years earlier when my parents downsized from their big suburban house into what they called a more manageable lifestyle property. Back then, the blender had been new, expensive, and part of a full kitchen set because my mother said she wanted to start making healthy breakfast smoothies. Now it was filthy. The power cord was crusted with dried coffee and something sticky that might have been honey. The plastic pitcher was cloudy and scratched. The lid smelled faintly sour, like someone had rinsed it once, and decided effort was for other people. Taped to the side was a coffee gift card. I checked the balance on my phone. $15. 10 feet away, my younger sister Talia was screaming with joy. Not crying, not tearing up, screaming. High-pitched, delighted, breathless, both hands clutching a notarized quitclaim deed to her chest like she had just won a life she did not have to earn. The deed transferred the historic Carriage house on Magnolia Row to her, the red brick one, the one with original oak floors, arched windows, hand-forged iron hinges, and a slate roof that survived storms older than my parents' marriage. The one located in the most expensive historic district in our city, surrounded by boutique galleries, restored townhomes, and old oaks wrapped in preservation rules. The one my grandparents left to the family trust, free and clear, no mortgage, no liens, no excuses. Current value, $450,000. My parents had just given it to Talia in front of 50 guests at the party I paid for. "I am going to turn it into my yoga sanctuary," Talia shrieked, bouncing in designer athleisure that cost more than some people's monthly groceries. A real healing space. Crystal grids in every corner, sound baths, maybe cacao circles. Can you imagine the content? Content. That was Talia's word for anything she did not want to call employment. My mother, Renee Whitfield, turned toward me with the smile she used when other people were watching. Warm from a distance, sharp up close. She wore the pearl necklace I bought her last Christmas after she mentioned admiring it in a store window 3 times, and then sighing like poverty had personally insulted her. "Maya, sweetheart," she said, placing a hand over her chest. "You are so practical. You do not need artistic, soulful things the way your sister does. That blender still works. I tested it last week." I looked at the crusted cord. She had not even cleaned it. My father, Bernard Whitfield, adjusted the silk tie I bought him for Father's Day and nodded with the solemn confidence of a man who believed unfairness sounded wiser if spoken slowly. "You make plenty of money, Maya. You can buy whatever you want. Your sister needs stability, asset security, something to help her find herself. You understand?" I did understand. Perfectly. I understood that I had spent $3,000 on this party myself. I hired the jazz trio now packing their instruments in the corner, confused by the sudden silence. I booked the historic inn because my mother said hotel ballrooms felt tacky. I ordered catering from the French restaurant she loved, paid for flowers, printed invitations, arranged transportation for older relatives, and coordinated 50 guests so my parents could enjoy being celebrated. My real gift was sitting unopened on the gift table, an envelope with a $5,000 check toward the European river cruise they had been mentioning for years. Next to it was the leather-bound photo album I spent weeks building from old wedding pictures, family vacations, anniversary trips, and the rare photographs where my parents actually looked at each other like love was still present and not just well-managed. But in front of the room, they gave Talia a $500,000 asset and gave me garbage with a gift card. To understand why I did not cry, you need to understand how we got there. 2 hours earlier, I arrived at the inn before anyone else to make sure everything was perfect. That is what I did in my family. I arrived early. I checked vendor invoices. I noticed missing place cards. I fixed things before anyone knew they were broken. My fiancé, Malcolm Hayes, came with me. He was a corporate lawyer, tall, steady, with warm brown skin and the kind of calm that made panic feel unnecessary when he entered a room. He carried the gift bag with the cruise check and the photo album while I walked through the dining room adjusting centerpieces by 1/2 inches. "You sure about all of this?" he asked. "It is their 35th anniversary." That was not my question. I smoothed my navy dress and pretended not to hear the concern beneath his words. "I want to do it right." He kissed my temple. "You always do. That is the problem. If you have ever been the reliable one in a family that mistakes reliability for permission to use you, tell me where you are listening from. I did not know that night would be the last time I paid to be humiliated. The party began beautifully. The jazz trio played old standards. The food smelled like butter, herbs, and money. The flowers looked elegant. Guests complimented the roasted salmon, the beef tenderloin, the tiny pastries arranged like jewelry. My parents stood in the center of the room accepting congratulations like visiting royalty. My mother laughed with church friends. My father shook hands with men who still treated his old commercial real estate career like a monument. Talia arrived 40 minutes late. Of course, my sister never entered a room on time because punctuality did not create enough drama. She wore a flowing white dress to someone else's anniversary party, long curls brushed over one shoulder, skin glowing, phone already lifted to capture herself walking beneath the inn's chandelier. She air-kissed my cheek without touching me. "This is cute," she said, looking around at the room I paid for. "Thank you. Very classic. Mom will love it." Then she drifted away to photograph the flowers. Talia was 29 and had never held a job longer than 6 months. She had been a boutique assistant, a wellness apprentice, a part-time social media coordinator, a crystal consultant, a brand strategist, and, for one unforgettable spring, a self-taught breathwork guide who did not understand asthma. Her current identity was lifestyle creator, which meant she filmed videos about feminine abundance from apartments other people paid for. Our parents called her sensitive. They called me strong. Strong meant I paid my own rent at 19. Sensitive meant Talia cried when asked to pay hers at 27. Strong meant I worked full-time through graduate school. Sensitive meant Talia needed a recovery trip after quitting a job she had worked for 11 days. Strong meant nobody asked whether I was tired. Sensitive meant everyone was required to protect Talia from consequences. The first time I remember being called strong, I was 9. Talia broke one of my grandmother's porcelain birds because she wanted to see whether it would bounce on carpet. It did not. It shattered into blue-white pieces under the coffee table, and Talia screamed like the bird had attacked her. My mother came running, gathered Talia into her arms, and looked at me. "Maya, you are older. Help clean this up." "Your sister is upset." I was 13 months older. That was all. But in my family, age was less a fact than a sentence. I was older, so I understood. I was smart, so I did not need help. I was capable, so I could absorb disappointment without anyone checking for bruises. By high school, I was the one filling out Talia's school forms because she got overwhelmed. By college, I was the one my parents called when she overdrafted. By the time I became a forensic accountant, my family had turned my profession into a punchline and a resource. "Maya loves numbers," Mom would say when handing me a bill she did not want to pay. They did not love that I understood numbers. They loved that numbers made me useful. Halfway through dinner, my father tapped his knife against a champagne glass. "Can I have everyone's attention?" The room quieted. My mother stood beside him, glowing with a secret. Talia looked up from her phone with a brightness that told me she already knew what was coming. My stomach tightened. Malcolm's hand found mine under the table. "Renee and I have been thinking about legacy," Dad said, "about what it means to pass love forward while we are still here to witness it. We have 2 daughters, both gifted in different ways." Different ways. That phrase usually meant one daughter was adored and the other was useful. "Talia, sweetheart," he said, "come stand with us." She floated forward, eyes already wet in a way that photographed well. My father pulled out the deed. Actual legal paperwork. Not a symbolic certificate, not a joke. A notarized quitclaim deed. "Your grandmother's carriage house on Magnolia Row is now yours," he announced. "Free and clear. Your mother and I believe you need a space to find your purpose, a healing studio, a yoga sanctuary, whatever speaks to your soul." The room erupted in applause. People hugged Talia. My mother cried. My father looked noble. Guests murmured about generosity, family legacy, and how wonderful it was to help young people build something meaningful. I sat there doing math, $450,000 in property, transferred to a woman who once called me to ask whether federal income tax was optional if you were still becoming yourself. Then my mother called my name. "Maya, honey, come here." The applause thinned into curiosity. I walked forward because 33 years of training can move your body even when your mind is already screaming. I remember Malcolm shifting behind me. One small movement, not enough for anyone else to notice, but I felt it like a hand at my back. He had watched enough family theater to recognize the moment before impact. He knew my parents did not call me forward to honor me. They called me forward when they wanted me contained. My mother was smiling too hard. Talia was wiping her eyes with the corner of a napkin, careful not to disturb her mascara. A woman from my parents' church whispered, "How sweet, both girls getting something." Both girls. The words nearly made me laugh before I knew what my gift was. Mom bent and pulled a box from beneath the gift table. I recognized it before I opened it. The shape, the yellowed tape, the brand logo faded under old kitchen grime. My hands lifted the lid automatically. Dirty blender, $15 coffee card. "I thought you could use this," Mom said brightly. "You are always so busy with work. It will help with those smoothies you used to make, and coffee because you love your lattes." The room went quiet. Not silent. Worse. That soft, embarrassed quiet where people understand they have witnessed cruelty but are waiting to see whether the victim will make it socially inconvenient. One of my father's old business partners looked down at his plate. My mother's friend lifted her wine glass and pretended to inspect it. A cousin near the back actually winced. Nobody said anything. That was how families like mine survived in public. Witnesses learned to call cruelty awkwardness. Guests learned that naming the injury would make them part of the problem. Everyone waited for me to do the emotional labor of making the room comfortable again. That had been my job for years. Smile. Thank them. Make a joke. Let Talia's gift stay magical and mine become funny. Keep the party beautiful. Dad leaned closer, still audible to the front tables. "You make plenty of money, Maya. You do not need things to feel valued. Your sister does." There it was. The family theology in one sentence. Talia needed. I provided. Talia felt. I understood. Talia received. I funded. I looked at my sister clutching the deed. I looked at my mother wearing my pearls. I looked at my father in my tie. I looked at the unopened cruise check I had written because I still believed generosity might one day be returned as love. Something inside me snapped. Not broke. Snapped. Broken things collapse. Snapped things become sharp. I set the blender box on the gift table with exaggerated care. Then I pulled out my phone and called the catering company. "Hi, this is Maya Whitfield. I need to cancel the payment authorization for tonight's event." My mother's face drained of color. "Maya, what are you doing?" I held up one finger. "Yes, I understand the event is currently in progress. I am revoking my credit card authorization immediately. The hosts will need to settle the balance directly." Then I called the inn coordinator. Same message, same calm voice, same blade sliding free. The jazz trio stopped pretending not to listen. The venue coordinator approached my father with a tablet, and the expression of someone who had just discovered generosity was not transferable. I picked up the dirty blender and held it so everyone could see the stained cord, cloudy pitcher, and sad little coffee card. "I think you two will need this," I said, "to pulverize your hopes of me funding your retirement." Then I walked out. Malcolm grabbed our coats and followed without saying a word. By the time we reached my Audi in the parking lot, raised voices were already spilling from the indoors, my mother protesting, my father demanding explanations, the coordinator requesting a card that was not mine. Malcolm opened my door. "Are you okay?" I sat behind the wheel, hands steady. "I am free." And I meant it. That was the night I stopped being the Whitfield family ATM. But I am a forensic accountant. Walking away was emotional. What came next was mathematical. 18 months passed without contact. No family dinners, no birthday calls, no requests disguised as concern, no emergency loans, no texts from my mother beginning with, "I know we have had our differences," and ending with a dollar amount. No Talia crying because her latest self-discovery required someone else's credit card. At first, the silence felt strange. Then it felt clean. The first month was the hardest because habit kept reaching for the phone before my pride caught up. I would see an article about retirement travel and almost send it to Mom. I would pass a restaurant Dad liked and almost think, maybe for his birthday. I would wake up on Sunday mornings with the old dread of family dinner and then remember I did not have to go. Freedom can feel like withdrawal when you have been addicted to approval. My therapist, the second one, not the first one who kept asking how I could communicate my needs better to people committed to ignoring them, told me that grief often arrives after relief. She was right. I grieved the family I had tried to buy with obedience. I grieved the mother who might have cleaned the blender and apologized. I grieved the father who might have said, "We were unfair." I grieved a sister who might have seen the deed in her hands and felt shame on my behalf. Then I stopped confusing grief with instructions. Malcolm and I bought a penthouse downtown, 2,000 square feet of floor-to-ceiling windows, soft gray furniture, warm wood, real art, and no family heirlooms with guilt attached. We chose every piece together. We paid for it together. Nobody could call it selfish because nobody else had a claim. My career flourished. 6 months after the party, I made senior director at my firm. I led the most complex fraud investigations in the region. My income increased by 40%. 2 industry publications profiled my work on a healthcare billing scheme that had stolen from patients for 7 years. I spoke at conferences. I trained younger accountants. I built a life that did not require my family to clap in order for it to count. Still, I watched. Not because I missed them, because patterns matter. A forensic accountant does not stop noticing just because the fraud is personal. One Saturday morning, while Malcolm slept and sunlight covered our kitchen island, I opened the county property database with coffee beside my laptop. Just curiosity, I told myself. Due diligence. Professional habit. I searched the Magnolia Row Carriage house. Talia had posted 3 photos from it in the first month, yoga poses in empty rooms, captions about sacred beginnings and divine feminine architecture. Then the posts changed, wine nights, string lights tied badly to historic timber beams, a video of someone doing a keg stand in the kitchen, Talia and friends dancing on the porch at 2 a.m, while neighbors in one of the quietest districts in the city probably called each other in outrage. The captions were almost insulting in their innocence. Building my sanctuary one breath at a time. Sacred spaces choose their keepers. Abundance flows when you stop forcing. Meanwhile, the grass in the background of one photo was already high enough to brush the bottom of the porch. In another, I could see a missing shutter leaning against the side wall like discarded scenery. One video showed a guest setting a sweating cocktail glass directly on an original windowsill, water pooling into wood that had survived more careful people for over a century. Talia did not see any of it. She saw angles. I saw depreciation. Instagram was entertainment. Public records were evidence. The historic district did not simply sound fancy. It had rules, strict maintenance codes, approved paint colors, landscaping standards, permits for exterior changes, preservation requirements for original shutters, windows, masonry, and roof lines. Owning property there meant becoming a custodian of history, not a party host with a ring light. The violation list loaded line by line. Failure to maintain landscaping to code standards. Grass over 8 inches. Fine, $500 per day until corrected. Exterior wooden window frames showing visible rot and peeling paint. Failure to restore using approved historical colors. Fine, $500 per day until corrected. Removal of original storm shutters without permit. Fine, $1,000 per day until restored or approved. Unpaid property taxes, administrative fees, interest. I sat back and let the numbers assemble themselves. The grass violation began 8 months earlier. The window violation began 6 months earlier. The shutter violation began 4 months earlier. $500 per day for 240 days. $500 per day for 180 days. $1,000 per day for 120 days. Taxes, fees, interest, roughly $348,750 in municipal debt, on a property worth $450,000. I smiled into my coffee. Debt does not care that you are sensitive. Debt does not care that your parents think you deserve stability. Debt grows when ignored. It compounds. It becomes hungry. The city had sent certified notices to the Carriage house address, 17 of them, delivered, ignored. The municipal lien had been filed 4 weeks earlier, priority status, senior to nearly every other claim. If the property sold or foreclosed, the city got paid first. Talia probably saw the official envelopes and decided they were not aligned with her energy. I spent the next 2 weeks researching municipal lien purchases. It is legal, boring, powerful. Municipalities sell unpaid fines and taxes to private investors to recover money quickly. The investor buys the debt, steps into the city's position, and gains the right to collect, negotiate, or foreclose. I formed NERA Capital LLC on a Tuesday, Neighborhood Equity Recovery Associates. It sounded bureaucratic enough to disappear in a stack of paperwork. Registered in Delaware, local agent, no public connection to Maya Whitfield. The following Monday, I called the city's revenue department. I am interested in purchasing municipal liens on a historic district property. 3 days later, after forms, approvals, and a wire transfer for $348,750, NERA Capital owned every penny of Talia's debt. The city clerk sounded almost cheerful when she confirmed the transfer. Honestly, we are glad to clear it, she said. This file has been a mess. I noticed. The owner has not responded to a single notice. That is consistent with my understanding. Are you representing an investment group? Yes. It was not a lie. I represented the one-person investment group known as me. The clerk emailed the stamped assignments by close of business. I printed them on heavy paper, put them in a labeled folder, and slid the folder into the bottom drawer of my home office beneath copies of the Instagram posts, inspection photos, tax records, and deed. Evidence has weight when you stack it. The city was thrilled. They received their money without chasing an unemployed influencer through court. I received leverage, complete, legal, crushing leverage. The carriage house my parents gave Talia for asset security was effectively mine. She just did not know it yet. That night, I showed Malcolm the documents over dinner. He read them slowly, lawyer brain moving behind calm eyes. You bought your sister's debt. I bought the city's debt. My sister happens to owe it. If she cannot pay, she loses the house. Only if she fails to pay the lien, interest, and fees like any adult property owner. Malcolm laughed once, not because it was funny, but because it was precise. They really gave a protected historic property to someone who cannot open certified mail. Yes. And they still think you are the boring daughter. They always were bad at valuation. I did not move immediately. Hot revenge makes mistakes. Audits do not. So I waited. I watched the fines continue through public records. I saw Talia post brunches, beach weekends, and videos about manifesting luxury while the carriage house windows rotted. I drove past twice and saw grass high enough to hide a small dog. The original shutters were gone, probably sold, thrown away, or repurposed for content. I let the trap sit, because I knew my family. Eventually, they would need me again. They always did. The call came on a Wednesday evening. Malcolm and I were cooking dinner. He handled pasta while I chopped tomatoes. My phone buzzed on the counter. Aunt Denise, my father's younger sister, was the only relative who had ever admitted my family treated me badly. She checked in occasionally, never pushed, never guilted, just reminded me I was not crazy for choosing distance. I answered on speaker. "Hey, Aunt Denise." "Maya, baby." Her voice was tight. "I am at City Hospital. Your father is in the ER. My knife stopped. Malcolm looked up. "What happened?" "Your mother says heart attack." "They brought him in 40 minutes ago. Doctors are running tests. Renee asked me to call you." Of course she did. My mother would not call me directly. Direct requests require humility. "Is he stable?" "They think so, but I think you should come." "I will be there in 20 minutes. Malcolm had already turned off the stove. "I am driving." "You do not have to." He took the knife from my hand and set it down. "I am driving. Your hands are shaking." I looked down. He was right. Not fear, memory. On the way to the hospital, city lights blurring past the windshield, I said, "Do you know what I am thinking about?" Malcolm took my hand. "What?" 3 years ago, August 14th, 2:30 in the morning, I had appendicitis. He went still. The pain was so bad I could not stand straight. I was on the bathroom floor trying not to throw up. I called Mom and told her I needed help getting to the ER. My voice sounded flat, like testimony. She said she could not leave the house because Talia had just broken up with a man she dated for 3 weeks and was threatening to cut off all her hair. Malcolm's jaw tightened. She told me to call a rideshare because I was capable and strong. The words came faster, so I did. A driver named Jerome took me to the hospital while I held a trash bag in my lap. I signed my own surgical consent forms. The surgeon said my appendix was close to rupturing. I went into surgery alone. I woke up alone. I remembered Jerome's eyes in the rearview mirror. He kept asking if I wanted him to call somebody. I said no because the answer had already been given. At the emergency room, a nurse asked for my emergency contact. I said my mother first, then changed it to myself because humiliation has limits, even when pain does not. After surgery, the nurse asked whether someone was coming to pick me up. I lied and said yes. Then I paid another stranger to drive me home with discharge papers in my lap and stitches pulling every time the car hit a bump. My mother called 2 days later, not to ask how surgery went, to ask whether I could send Talia money for new extensions because her breakup had damaged her confidence. Malcolm pulled over to the shoulder. Hazard lights clicked. "The next morning," I said, staring ahead. I checked Instagram from the hospital bed. Mom had posted a picture at 3 a.m., her and Talia eating pizza in pajamas. Caption said, "Heartbreak healing sleepover." Malcolm reached across the console and pulled me to him as much as the car allowed. I did not cry. I had used the tears years ago. "That is why my hands are shaking," I said into his shoulder. "Not because Dad might be dying, because I nearly died and they chose Talia's bad haircut over my appendix. Now he has a panic attack over money, and I am expected to run." "You do not have to go in there." "Yes, I do." "Why?" I smiled, and even I could feel how cold it was. "Because they are about to learn the financial stress is not random. I want to see their faces when they realize who owns the knife." Malcolm studied me. I expected him to ask me to be gentle, to take the high road, to protect my peace. Instead, he kissed my forehead. "Then let's go teach them what consequences look like. That is why I am marrying him." The hospital smelled like antiseptic and panic. Fluorescent lights washed the third-floor VIP waiting area into something pale and unreal. Of course, my parents were in the VIP section. They would never suffer a medical scare near vending machines and ordinary chairs if there was a private waiting room available. I heard my mother before I saw her. "She will not answer. 6 calls, Denise." After everything we gave her, after we raised her, after she humiliated us at our anniversary party, Aunt Denise cut in, tired and firm. "Renee, maybe she did not answer because you have not spoken to her in 18 months unless you needed something." "There she is," Mom snapped. She hurried toward me, mascara smudged, hair loose, wearing the cashmere cardigan I gave her 2 Christmases ago. She reached for a hug. I stepped smoothly aside. Malcolm moved just enough to block a second attempt. "How is Dad?" "Oh, now you care?" Mom's worry became anger instantly. "Now you show up after abandoning this family?" "Renee," my father's voice came from the waiting room doorway. "Enough." He was pale but standing on his own. Not a heart attack. Just as I suspected. "What did the doctor say?" I asked. "Panic attack," he admitted. "Stress-induced. They want to observe me overnight." "Good. Then I will go." "Wait." He held up a hand. "We need to talk about Talia." About the Carriage house. There it was. The real emergency. Aunt Denise gave me a small, apologetic look. She had been used as bait and knew it. 5 minutes, I said. Private. My father led me into a small consultation room. My mother rushed in behind us before I could close the door because boundaries were never welcome where she was concerned. The room had 2 chairs, a small couch, a rack of pamphlets about cholesterol, and the dead air of places where families hear things they cannot fix. I remained standing. "What is the crisis?" Neither of them answered immediately. I let the silence stretch. In fraud interviews, silence is useful. People rush to fill it. They confess to things you did not know enough to ask. Finally, Mom broke. "The house," she said. "Talia's house. We are going to lose it." "How unfortunate." Her head snapped up. "Unfortunate?" "Your sister is about to lose everything because of ridiculous city fines and all you can say is unfortunate? What would you like me to say?" "That you will help." My father cleared his throat. "A company called NERA Capital bought the municipal lien. They sent a demand letter yesterday, full payment in 30 days or foreclosure." "How much?" He swallowed. "With accumulated fines, unpaid taxes, administrative fees, and interest, approximately $348,000. $348,750, I corrected automatically. My mother's eyes narrowed. I smiled faintly. "Precision matters." "Maya," she said, tears gathering now. "I know we have had issues. I know you felt hurt about the anniversary gift, but this is bigger than that. This is your sister's future. You have money. You have always had money." "A few $100,000 is nothing to you." "It is more than most people make in 7 years." "But you are not most people," Dad said, old authority creeping back into his voice. "You are a Whitfield. Whitfields take care of family." "When was the last time this family took care of me?" They both looked offended, as if the question itself was rude. "You never needed help," Mom said. "Everything came easy to you." "Appendicitis did not come easy." Her face flickered. "Do not bring up old things." "You mean evidence." Dad sighed sharply. "This is not productive. Bottom line, will you help your sister or not?" There were 2 answers they expected. Yes, followed by a check. No, followed by a speech they could later quote as proof I was cold. They had not prepared for option 3. I opened the consultation room door. "Malcolm, bring the briefcase, please." Hope flashed across my mother's face. She thought briefcase meant checkbook. Malcolm appeared with his leather litigation briefcase, expression neutral. Aunt Denise stood behind him, curious and watchful. I set the briefcase on the small table and opened it slowly. "You want my help?" I said. "You believe I should write a check for Talia's debt because she ignored 17 city notices and treated a protected property like a party venue." "She did not know," Mom said quickly. "She did not care. There is a difference." I laid the first stack of documents on the table: municipal violations, inspector photos, overgrown grass, rotting window frames, missing shutters, unpaid taxes. My father's face went pale as he looked down. I added Instagram printouts, beer cans on the historic porch, string lights stapled into old beams, Talia posing under captions about sanctuary while the paint peeled behind her. Instagram is public, I said. So is the Historic Preservation Board, if anyone would like to show them how she has been caring for this asset security. Mom looked sick. I placed the final document on top. NERA Capital LLC Lien Purchase Agreement. My father reached for it. His eyes moved through the transaction, the corporate registration, the agent information, and finally, the officers. He stopped breathing. You, he whispered. Mom looked between us. What? She bought the debt. It was the first time my father had ever looked at one of my documents with full attention, not because he respected the work, because the work had him by the throat. His hand hovered over the registration page, tracing the company name as if staring harder could change the officer listing. NERA Capital LLC, registered agent through Malcolm's office, managing member hidden through Delaware filings until my disclosure packet made the connection obvious enough to hurt. I had given him the whole map. That was the difference between revenge and audit. Revenge hides in surprise. Audit lays the facts on the table and lets people understand they did this to themselves. My mother's confusion became horror, then rage. You are foreclosing on your own sister? I am the lien holder, I said. Talia can pay the debt and keep the house. She cannot pay $348,000. Then perhaps she should not have accepted a property she could not maintain. This is spite over a blender. No, I said. The blender was the moment I realized who you were. This is consequence. Dad sat slowly. What do you want? I removed the settlement agreement Malcolm drafted. I will forgive Talia's lien entirely. I will release the debt, file the lien satisfaction, and she keeps the carriage house. Hope returned to Mom's face like a bad habit. But there are conditions. Dad's eyes sharpened. First, you and Mom repay the $80,000 you have borrowed from me over the years. Every emergency loan, every medical bill, every credit card rescue, every promise to repay next month. I have records of every transfer. Mom opened her mouth. I continued. Second, you sell your primary residence and use the proceeds to pay me, clear your own debts, and move somewhere you can afford. You are behind on your own property taxes and carrying credit card balances you cannot sustain. You cannot order us to sell our home, Dad said. I can offer terms, you can refuse. What else? Talia gets a documented job within 60 days, any legal job, pay stubs, employment taxes, proof. Mom made a sound of disgust. You want your sister humiliated at some menial job. I want your sister introduced to adulthood. And if we refuse? Then I foreclose in 30 days, take the carriage house, and sell it. I will probably net around $400,000 after fees. You will still owe me $80,000, which I can pursue in civil court. Talia loses the house. You lose the chance to solve this quietly. My father read the agreement. His jaw clenched. You became cold. I looked at both of them, sitting in that sterile little room surrounded by photographs of their failures. I am not cold. I am done being warm for people who would rather burn me for heat than build their own fire. I left them with 48 hours to decide. Malcolm took my hand in the hallway. How did it go? The trap is sprung. Now we wait to see whether they are smart enough to take the exit. They were not. 48 hours later, they requested a meeting in the hospital cafeteria because my father had been discharged but was waiting on final prescriptions. Neutral ground, public setting, safer for people who still thought their dignity was intact. When Malcolm and I arrived, Mom, Dad, and Talia sat at a small round table. Talia wore oversized sunglasses indoors and scrolled through her phone like this was a boring appointment someone else would fix. Dad had a folder in front of him, not mine. Do you have the signed agreement? I asked. We have a counteroffer, he said. Of course they did. He slid the folder forward. Your terms are draconian. We will repay the $80,000 over 5 years. We will not sell our home. That is non-negotiable, and requiring Talia to take a menial job is vindictive. Mom crossed her arms. We are your parents, not your tenants. Talia did not look up. This whole thing is toxic. My followers think so too. Are any of them offering to pay $348,000? Her sunglasses lifted just enough for me to see hatred. You are jealous. Of what? Of me having something you could not control. I own the debt attached to the thing you could not maintain. Because you are obsessed with punishing me. I am obsessed with evidence. Punishment is what happens when evidence points at you. How many of them are willing to pay your lien? I asked. Her sunglasses lifted just enough for me to see hatred. Dad leaned back. If you attempt foreclosure, we have spoken to a lawyer friend. We can tie this in probate court for years. Family trust issues are complicated. Judges dislike these disputes. You will spend more in legal fees than the debt is worth. They thought they had found leverage. I looked at Malcolm. His eyes were dancing, but his face stayed professional. Before we discuss civil court, I said, there is another issue. I placed a manila folder on top of my father's counteroffer. Do you remember the quitclaim deed you used to transfer the Carriage house to Talia? Mom frowned. What does that have to do with anything? Line 37, declared property value. Dad's expression flickered. $25,000. That was standard, he said too quickly. Standard fraud? Creative accounting. The IRS uses a different term. Talia finally put down her phone. I removed the independent appraisal I commissioned 3 months earlier. The Carriage house appraised at $450,000. That is a $425,000 discrepancy. Dad went very still. IRS Code Section 7201, I said. Willful attempt to evade tax. Up to 5 years in federal prison and fines up to $250,000 per person. The cafeteria noise seemed to recede. Malcolm stepped in with lawyerly calm. If Maya proceeds with foreclosure, the deed becomes part of public court filings. The IRS monitors property transfers and foreclosure records for undervaluation patterns exactly like this. They will audit. The appraisal, transfer deed, and family trust records will be discoverable. Mom whispered, You would not. You threatened to trap me in court for years, I said. I am explaining the room you are standing in. Dad looked at the folder, then at me. For the first time, he understood he was not negotiating with the daughter who used to write checks to keep peace. He was negotiating with an auditor who had found the error he could not bury. If you sign my agreement now, I said, sliding the original settlement across the table, I release the lien after performance. No foreclosure, no public filing. The deed stays buried unless someone else digs. And if we do not? Then I proceed, civilly, publicly, with every document attached. Dad's hand shook as he picked up the pen. You would send your own family to prison? You would let your daughter steal from me and then call it love? He signed. Mom cried silently as she signed after him. Talia shoved the paper back like it had burned her. You are a monster. No, I said, checking each signature. A monster hides discrepancies. I report them. This is just an audit. This is blackmail. Blackmail is illegal. Consequences with documentation are not. I placed the signed agreement into my bag. You have 90 days to list the house. Talia, start updating your resume. I hear coffee shops are hiring. I walked out of the cafeteria with Malcolm beside me. That went well, he murmured. It went exactly as calculated. For the first time in 18 months, I did not just feel free. I felt finished. That feeling lasted until the next morning, when my mother tried to test the edges of the agreement. She sent one text from a number I had not blocked. You have made your point. Your father barely slept. Talia is devastated. We will do the house sale, but please do not force your sister to embarrass herself with a job. She has anxiety. I forwarded it to Malcolm. He replied with one sentence, no direct contact, counsel only. I copied that sentence and sent it back. Then I blocked the number. 2 hours later, Talia posted a black square on Instagram with white text. Sometimes the people closest to you are jealous of your light because they live in darkness. I screenshotted it and added it to the folder, not because it mattered legally, because patterns matter. Over the next 60 days, Talia had more chances than most people ever get. She could have worked part-time. She could have rented the Carriage house for approved daytime wellness classes after fixing the code issues. She could have asked the Preservation Board for a payment plan, applied for small restoration grants, sold the designer bags visible in half her videos, or done literally anything that resembled ownership. She did none of it. Instead, she filmed herself burning sage in the kitchen while an unpaid tax notice sat on the counter behind her. She posted a healing retreat invitation with a suggested donation of $188 per person, then canceled it when only 2 people signed up and one asked whether the bathroom worked. She started a series called Soft Life After Betrayal and quit after 4 episodes because the comments kept asking who paid the property taxes. Every week, I checked employment databases and public filings. No job, no business license, no payment plan, no repair permit, no evidence that adulthood had made contact. 2 months later, the final phase began. I tracked everything the way I track all recoveries: dates, filings, receipts, confirmed deposits. My parents listed their home in week 1. Open houses began in week 3. Multiple offers arrived in week 5. They accepted a cash offer in week 7, $10,000 under asking because desperation has a smell and buyers know it. Their listing photos were almost tender in their dishonesty. Bright kitchen, staged flowers, perfect throw pillows. My mother's cardigan folded over an armchair as if the house belonged to a peaceful woman who did not weaponize tears. My father's study photographed at an angle that hid the water stain near the ceiling and the stack of overdue notices that had lived on his desk for years. The description called it a lovingly maintained family home. I wondered whether the realtor knew how many emergencies that house had manufactured for me. The closing happened on a gray Tuesday morning. At 10:47, my phone buzzed. Wire transfer received $80,000. Every unpaid loan, every emergency, every promise, returned. It should have felt like victory. It felt more like closing a file after years of unnecessary continuances. I called Malcolm. They paid. How do you feel? Like I have one more thing to do. Talia had been given 60 days to get a job and start resolving the Carriage house debt under the agreement. She did neither. She posted about toxic relatives. She posted quotes about jealous women weaponizing money. She posted a video crying in the Carriage house about betrayal while standing in front of rotting window frames she still had not repaired. My parents tried to help her avoid the job requirement in the only way they knew how, by pretending a fantasy was paperwork. Dad sent Malcolm a scanned consulting agreement stating that Talia had been hired by a friend's wellness boutique as a brand alignment advisor. It listed no hourly wage, no tax withholding, no duties, no schedule, and the signature belonged to a woman who had filed for bankruptcy the previous year. Malcolm sent back a 2-line response requesting payroll records and employment tax registration. Nothing came. Mom tried next, emailing a handwritten note that said Talia was caring for her parents emotionally during a difficult transition and that this should count as work. It did not.
By the time the foreclosure processor filed the final notice, every escape route I had offered them had been ignored, faked, or insulted. Karma did not arrive as a quote. It arrived as a sheriff's notice. I instructed the foreclosure processing company to proceed with eviction. That afternoon, Malcolm and I parked across from the Carriage house. A sheriff's vehicle waited out front with a moving truck I arranged because I am not cruel without logistics. The street was quiet, lined with restored brick homes and trees Talia had never appreciated except as backgrounds. The front door opened. I heard my sister before I saw her. "You cannot do this. This is my sanctuary." The sheriff, a patient black woman in her 50s, held up the notice. "Ma'am, this is a legal foreclosure and eviction. You have 10 minutes to collect personal items. Everything else stays." Talia screamed my name when she saw me step from the car. "You evil witch! Mom and Dad paid you."
You got your money. I stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. For a second, I saw the little sister I taught to ride a bike, the girl who asked me to braid her hair before school dances. The teenager who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms because she said I made the room feel safe. Then I saw the woman who stood smiling with a deed while I held a dirty blender. That money paid for the past, I said. This house pays for your laziness. It was mine. They tried to give it to you. You failed to keep it. I needed time to build my brand. You had 18 months. You knew I was finding myself. Minimum wage would have paid the maintenance fees if you had started when the first notice arrived. The sheriff glanced at her watch. Ma'am, time is up. I will sue you, Talia shrieked as deputies escorted her down the steps. I will ruin you. I will tell everyone. Please do, I said. I am sure your remaining followers will be devastated. The deputies guided her toward a taxi. Yes, I arranged the taxi too. She would not be homeless. She would be my parents' problem in their smaller rental apartment, which felt like natural balance returning to the universe. When the taxi pulled away with Talia still shouting behind the glass, the sheriff handed me the keys. Property is yours now, all legal. I climbed the steps and opened the door. The carriage house was empty. Red brick walls, oak floors, arched windows, 2 centuries of craftsmanship surviving 18 months of neglect and bad vibes. My footsteps echoed through the room Talia had called a yoga sanctuary. She had left dents in the floor, nail holes in the beams, candle wax near a window, and a faint smell of stale wine. I carried 1 cardboard box inside, the blender. Same dirty blender from the anniversary party. I had kept it in storage for 18 months because forensic accountants understand evidence, but daughters understand symbolism. I had considered throwing it away a dozen times. Each time I stopped. Not because it mattered materially. It was a cheap appliance now, grimy and useless, except as a monument to exactly how little my family thought I deserved. But some objects become timestamps. They hold the second before and the second after. That blender held the moment I stopped translating disrespect into obligation. I set it in the exact center of the oak floor, plugged it into the wall, turned the dial to high. The sound tore through the empty carriage house like a scream, like laughter, like a reckoning with blades. It echoed off the brick and filled every corner of the space my parents thought Talia deserved more than I deserved dignity. For 1 full minute, I stood there and listened. It was ridiculous, petty, beautiful. Then I walked out and closed the door behind me. The blender kept screaming. Malcolm waited by the car with his arms crossed and a small, proud smile. How do you feel now? Like I have one more thing to do. I opened my phone and started an email. Recipient, tipsairs.gov. Malcolm exhaled softly. Maya. Professional ethics, I said. A $450,000 property declared at $25,000 is not a rounding error. The settlement released the lien and resolved the money they owed me. It did not require me to hide a felony. They assumed my silence was part of the price. They forgot I am an auditor. I attached the quitclaim deed, independent appraisal, property records, and transfer documentation. Subject, anonymous tip, property valuation fraud. I typed the message carefully, clear facts, no emotion, dates, names, amounts, discrepancy, supporting records, the kind of evidence that makes a tax investigator sit forward. Then I hit send. The email vanished into the federal system, carrying the last thread between me and the Whitfields. Let the government deal with them. I was done. My phone stayed silent for 14 minutes. Then Aunt Denise called. I answered because she had earned that. I heard about the eviction, she said. I figured. Your mother is telling people you destroyed the family over old resentment. That is her right. And the truth? The truth has attachments. Aunt Denise was quiet for a moment. Then she laughed softly, not because anything was funny, but because some truths arrive wearing exactly the right shoes. Your grandmother would have loved that. I looked at the carriage house, at the sold sign still waiting in my trunk, at the sunlight catching the old brick. I hope so. She would have told you not to feel guilty. I do not. Good, she said. Do not start now. Before leaving, I walked to the gate and hung the sold sign myself. The buyer was an architect who specialized in historic restoration. She paid $20,000 over asking because she understood what the carriage house was, not a free asset or an aesthetic backdrop, but a piece of history that needed care. She had already shown me sketches, restored shutters, repaired windows, clean brick, the oak floors saved. The place would be beautiful again. Just not for Talia. The architect's name was Dr. Elise Carter, a preservation specialist with silver locks, round glasses, and the kind of reverence my family reserved only for status. When she first toured the carriage house, she ran her hand over the brick and said, "People think old buildings are fragile. They are not. They are patient. There is a difference." I liked her immediately. She planned to turn the carriage house into a small archive studio and residence for visiting artists working on Black Southern history projects. No crystal grids, no keg stands, no fake sanctuary language. Real preservation. Real use. A future that honored the past without exploiting it. When she wired the funds, I felt something in my chest settle. The carriage house had not returned to Talia. It had not returned to my parents. It had moved beyond all of us into hands that understood stewardship. I made sure the sign was centered on the wrought iron gate. Behind me, inside the empty carriage house, the blender still roared. Malcolm slid into the passenger seat. Where to? I looked once at the red brick building, at the past, at the house they gave away because they believed I would keep paying to be forgotten. Home. I drove away from the carriage house, the toxic family, the dirty blender, and every version of me that ever thought being useful would make them love me. If your parents gave your sister a $450,000 house and gave you a dirty blender at the party you paid for, would you walk away or make the numbers collect everything back? Tell me what you would have done when the lien became yours.